It says, Stephanie White explains why South Carolina can't keep up with UConn. First of all, why the hell are you still talking about this college stuff? What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you still talking? You went and did your gigs. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? You need to be focused on the Indiana Fever right now. You're more concerned with if South Carolina can have a competitive.
The Indiana Fever have only a limited number of days remaining before the expansion draft protection deadline arrives. Kelsey Mitchell's contract situation is still unsettled, and the lineup that powered the league's top offense is in clear need of smart, calculated upgrades. Yet at the same time, their head coach Stephanie White was on air analyzing whether South Carolina Gamecocks has enough scoring strength to challenge UConn Huskies in the NCAA tournament. Think about that for a moment. College-level breakdowns while her professional squad's direction is hanging in the balance. This goes beyond questionable timing. It hints at something deeper. What White expressed in that discussion exposes a perspective on offensive capability that feels completely at odds with how she utilized Caitlin Clark just last season, raising serious concerns about alignment between philosophy and execution.
Is more important than getting the proper pieces around Caitlin Clark so that we can have a successful season. I don't even know why you're talking about them right now, okay? Now, there was a comment she made about the Connecticut offense in comparison to the South Carolina offense, which is really, really interesting to me because the Indiana Fever had the best offense in the league before you got there, and you came there and messed it all up. You was just supposed to bring the defense. That's what you were known for. But
the exact words from Stephanie White during that ESPN appearance make the contradiction impossible to ignore. When asked which team could truly challenge UConn Huskies, she responded, "I just don't think South Carolina Gamecocks has enough offensive firepower to keep up with UConn." In that moment, she was clearly evaluating teams based on scoring explosiveness, their ability to generate points in bursts, create high-quality looks, and finish with elite efficiency. And that's what makes it so striking, because just months earlier, she spent an entire season gradually limiting the most dangerous offensive weapon the WNBA has ever seen. Think back to when Caitlin Clark erupted against the New York Liberty, draining deep three after deep three from distances that felt almost unreal, launching shots commentators compared to Tokyo range while still in Indiana. It was the kind of offensive brilliance that invites comparisons to Stephen Curry, pure, unstoppable scoring power. The very same type of offensive dominance White now praises when discussing college teams. Yet during those moments, she stood on the sideline with a closed-off posture, visibly frustrated, signaling that this wasn't the style she wanted.
Never do that for Caitlin Clark. You call her brand of basketball hero ball. Let's take a look, man. While Indiana Fever fans know Stephanie White as their head coach, perhaps they don't know that much of White's coaching history came at the college ranks. After her own playing career ended, White was an assistant coach at Ball State University for a season, then went to Kansas State for a season, then went to Toledo for 3 seasons. After that, White went to the professional ranks.
She labeled it hero ball. That was the phrase Stephanie White used to describe what was arguably the most efficient scoring display of the entire season. When your lead guard is knocking down shots from 30 feet with defenders all over her and the reaction is frustration, it reveals everything about the underlying offensive mindset. But it didn't stop at post-game comments about Caitlin Clark's scoring bursts. There were clear tactical decisions that worked against it. The shift to playing her at small forward wasn't about unlocking her strengths, it effectively limited them, pulling her away from the ball, cutting down her control, and placing her in a role where she couldn't fully run the offense. Then came the hub approach, elevating Lexi Hall into a secondary playmaking role, reshaping the system into one where multiple players initiate possessions. On the surface, it sounds balanced and team-focused, but in practice, it meant one thing: taking the ball out of Clark's hands. The Indiana Fever had already built the most efficient offense in the league, leading the WNBA in offensive rating before White stepped in. Yet her first major adjustment was to rework that structure in a way that reduced the impact of the very player driving that elite production. Efficiency. All right.
5 seasons at Vanderbilt, absolutely piss poor trash. That was trash. She clearly showed enough for the Connecticut Sun to hire her as a head coach in 2023, which clearly was a good call, okay? Now, Here it says, therefore, White has a clear love and understanding of the college game, not to mention that she works as a basketball analyst for ESPN and the Big Ten Network during the WNBA offseason.
Let's examine Stephanie White's track record, because this trend didn't just appear out of nowhere. During her time at Vanderbilt Commodores, she compiled a 46-83 record across 5 seasons. That's roughly a 35% win percentage at the college level. Those aren't the numbers of a short-term rebuild or a program slowly improving. That's an extended stretch of losing. Yet despite that, the Connecticut Sun still viewed her as the right choice to lead their team. To her credit, things worked out there. She stepped into a veteran-heavy roster that already understood how to compete, emphasize defense, and didn't need to reinvent the system. That's the formula that fits her style: experienced players, a defense-first identity, and minimal need for offensive experimentation. Which is exactly why her current situation with the Indiana Fever is so intriguing. Now she's dealing with a 23-year-old generational talent in Caitlin Clark, whose game is built on creativity, deep-range shooting, and elite court vision that disrupts traditional defensive structures. That style directly contrasts with the controlled, structured, defense-oriented approach White has typically leaned on.
Think critically about other teams, both in professional ranks and in college. This is not the time to be taking off your professional Indiana Fever hat and being worried about how can South Carolina keep the game competitive with UConn. This is not the time for that. This is not the time for that, man. Y'all messed up last offseason. Can we lock in? Come on, man. Here it says, now this is what is mind-boggling in relation to Caitlin Clark. Check this out. Stephanie White.
Let's return to the contradiction around offensive firepower, because this is where Stephanie White's comments really expose her core philosophy. When she's analyzing college programs, she praises explosive scoring, the ability to pile up points quickly, create opportunities, and overwhelm opponents. But when she's leading professionals, that same explosiveness often gets dialed back. What does that point to? Control. It suggests the priority isn't always maximizing efficiency, it's enforcing a specific system. Defense-first principles, structured sets, and reduced individual freedom. That model can succeed with seasoned players who already know how to operate within a framework and just need discipline and organization. But it can struggle badly when the roster includes a once-in-a-generation offensive force who thrives on instinct and creativity. Think about how the greatest scorers have been handled. Did teams ever try to limit Stephen Curry by taking the ball out of his hands more? Did anyone watch Diana Taurasi and decide she should shoot less in favor of extra passing? Of course not. Generational players aren't restricted, they're empowered. Systems are built around them, designed to amplify what makes them special. And if that occasionally resembles hero ball, it doesn't matter, because results are what count and the scoreboard doesn't care how the points are created.
Offensive firepower. You tried to single-handedly shut down the most electrifying, the greatest, most offensive firepower in the league by putting Caitlin Clark as small forward last season. Now you care about offensive firepower? You tried to eliminate the firepower so much so by you keep bringing up this hub thing, making Aaliyah Boston a hub, a mini.
Here's what makes this so frustrating for Indiana Fever fans. They watched Caitlin Clark carry Iowa Hawkeyes to back-to-back national championship appearances through sheer offensive brilliance. They saw firsthand what happens when she's given full freedom to create. They experienced the draw, the packed arenas, the soaring TV ratings, the undeniable buzz. They understand exactly what kind of talent they have. And then they see their head coach Stephanie White spending the offseason breaking down college matchups instead of fully constructing a roster around that talent. They hear her praise high-powered scoring in other teams while dialing it back within her own system. They remember the small forward experiment, the hero ball label, and the visible frustration whenever Clark caught fire. The gap between those ideas is massive, and it leads to a serious question. Does White truly grasp what she has in Clark? Does she recognize that this isn't just another skilled player who needs to be shaped into a structure, but a rare, system-altering force that demands a completely different approach? Look at last season's decisions. That small forward shift didn't last a possession or two, it stretched across multiple games, forcing a natural point guard off the ball while less dynamic players took over primary creation duties. That's not simple experimentation, that's rigidity. It reflects a coach trying.
That's not giving us more firepower. You said yourself when Caitlin Clark was on fire, demonstrating all the firepower you need, when she was going off 3 after 3 after 3 versus the New York Liberty, when she was shooting from Tokyo, okay, while making the baskets in Indiana, you ran around and called it hero ball. You sat there on the sidelines with your arms crossed mad like this because she was on fire. It was explosive. It was offensive firepower. Now you're picking teams in college because of their offensive firepower. Stop it, man. Stop it, man. I don't understand this lady. You know, you a defensive coach. You're the defensive lady, right? That's your whole thing. Defense, defense, defense. Why ain't you picking a defensive team then? Since when did you start being so enamored with offensive firepower? It's weird. It's weird, man. Stephanie White, I need you to lock in on the Indiana Fever's offseason that we need to actually have a good one of, and getting the right free agents, landing a draft pick, figuring out what you're going to do with Kelsey Mitchell. I need you to get those things right, because last offseason, you guys blew it. Get down in the comments and let me know what you
to validate a system instead of adjusting it to fit elite talent. Then there's the hub concept with Lexie Hull. No disrespect to Hull, she's a valuable role contributor, but elevating her as a secondary initiator in an offense built around Clark is like pacing a high-performance machine with something designed for stability. It doesn't elevate the star, it restricts it. Before White's arrival, the Fever already had the most efficient offense in the league, averaging 87.2 points per game with Clark orchestrating everything. The system was effective, productive, and clearly working. Yet the first instinct was to overhaul it rather than build on what was already elite. Seconds anyway. Now, contrast that with how she talks about UConn's offense. She praises their efficiency, their depth, their ability to score from multiple. She clearly understands that explosive scoring can decide championships at the college level, yet that same understanding doesn't seem to carry over into her approach with professional teams. So what explains the gap? Is it stubbornness? A deep-rooted belief that the pro game demands tighter structure than the college level? Or maybe discomfort with a player who thrives outside traditional systems? Whatever the cause, it's becoming a serious issue because Caitlin Clark isn't going to reinvent herself. She's not going to suddenly turn into a low-usage, spot-up option who neatly fits into a defense-first framework. That's not her identity, and it's not what makes her elite. Trying to force that kind of shift is exactly how generational talent gets misused. Meanwhile, the pressure is building. The expansion draft protection deadline is closing in, free agency is around the corner, and Kelsey Mitchell's situation still needs resolution. The roster requires upgrades, and every moment Stephanie White spends on ESPN analysis is time not spent addressing those priorities. The previous offseason already raised concerns. The DeWanna Bonner situation created tension across the league, roster gaps were left unresolved, and coaching choices limited the impact of the team's top player. Now, heading into what could be the most critical offseason in franchise history for the Indiana Fever, those same patterns appear to be repeating. There's continued focus on analyzing college basketball, continued praise for offensive firepower elsewhere while limiting it internally, and little visible urgency despite major deadlines approaching. This goes beyond poor prioritization. It points to a deeper mismatch between what the Fever need and what White emphasizes. Which leads to the central question fans are asking. Can Stephanie White truly construct a system that maximizes Caitlin Clark's strengths? Or will her commitment to a defense-first philosophy continue to hold that potential back? Seconds to maximize a once-in-a-generation offensive talent. Will she prioritize roster construction over media appearances? Because right now, the evidence points in one direction. The actions simply don't line up with the message. The priorities feel out of sync, and the window to build a true contender around Caitlin Clark may be far shorter than most realize. There's realistically a 3-year stretch before defenses fully adapt, before the novelty fades, and before casual attention shifts elsewhere. That's 3 years to assemble the right roster, build chemistry, and make a serious championship push. And the Indiana Fever may have already lost year 1 due to decisions that reduced the impact of their most important player. They can't afford to let year 2 slip away. The expansion draft deadline is closing fast. Kelsey Mitchell's situation still needs resolution, and the roster clearly requires reinforcements. Meanwhile, Stephanie White faces a defining choice: commit to building around Clark's offensive brilliance or continue working against it. Because trying to balance both simply doesn't work. You can't celebrate high-powered scoring in college while limiting it at the professional level. You can't label it hero ball when your star dominates and still claim to value offensive explosiveness. You can't spend an off-season focused on media appearances while critical roster decisions remain unresolved. A direction has to be chosen. Either the philosophy centers on maximizing offensive firepower or it doesn't. Either a generational talent becomes the foundation or she doesn't. Either the franchise's future is the top priority or it isn't. Right now, the pattern suggests everything is being done except the one thing that truly matters: fully unlocking Clark and constructing a championship-level team around her. If that approach doesn't shift, this offseason risks repeating the same mistakes. The cycle will continue, and fans will once again watch a rare talent constrained by a system that values structure over star power. The deadline is looming, time is running out, and the head coach is still discussing college basketball on national TV. It doesn't add up.